On to number 8, discussion and possible action on the site plan of operation. Owner is 5 Diamonds, Inc. The applicant is Tom Kelnick. Location West 234, South 3555, West Paul Parkway. Good evening.
Good evening.
Planner Rygarczyk.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Before you tonight is 5 Diamonds. I think we're all well aware of the baseball complex. What they are looking to do is amend their site plan of operation to accommodate a 42,840 square foot indoor sports training facility, additional parking, and a 105 foot by 120 foot multi-use field. In order to locate the indoor training facility and the parking, they are removing 2 of the smaller diamonds that are on the southeast corner of the site. Along the east edge, there is the ATC utility easement that runs along that. The expansion of the parking lot will occur within this easement, but all lighting in that will be outside of the easement, as well as the training facility will be outside of this easement. In my staff report, I have identified 4 planner comments as part of their submittal that was given to the town, Engineer Janelli and myself. They do have correspondence from ATC. ATC has approved the additional parking lot, again, as long as none of the street lighting is within the easement or the building. There is a letter from the Army Corps of Engineers that's authorizing up to 6,927 square feet of wetland fill, subject to some conditions. One of those is confirmation of the Section 104 water quality certification has been granted by the DNR. The third is a letter from Drury from DNR approving the state wetland water qualification certification under the Clean Water Act. The fourth is a letter from Allen Barrows stating that the proposed grading plan meets the county stormwater management and the erosion control ordinance with regard to accommodating best management practices. I will have Engineer Janelli shortly here to talk about the setback from the Conservancy District. And then last, there was correspondence between Engineer Janelli and Allen Barrows with regard to the wetland delineation from Don Reed. That was originally conducted in April of 2010, and it is good for 5 years. With regard to the town policies, I've identified 3. The first one is at the P1 zoning district, which this property has been rezoned to. It does talk about that the purpose and intent is for public and private outdoor park and recreation space and public lands to the greatest extent possible, along with preserving conservation of natural environment and features. As far as the permitted uses do talk about not only the outdoor activities, but it does talk about that you can have buildings and structures that are supportive of the outdoor recreation facilities, including parking. So a determination that the Plan Commission and the board will have to make tonight is if they feel that the indoor facility meets the intent of the P1 district. As we all know, in the original approvals with the conditional use and site plan of operation, there was intentions for a building. While it wasn't to the size that's being proposed today, it was part of the original approvals. It was when we rezoned the property and did the final site plan of operation, the applicant had asked that that specific condition be removed for his own reasons. The second that I've identified is with regard to the architecture of the building. We do have in our ordinance that says that 50% of the building should be of a brick, decorative masonry, glass panel, EIFS, or other appropriate finished grade facade approved by the Planning Commission and the board. So the question that I raise for the Planning Commission and the board is that they need to make a determination. The metal siding that they're using, do they feel that do you feel that that's a finished grade material sort, then I think that it fits within the code. And then the third is with regard to the new building, it shall be accented by a minimal amount of landscaping placed around the foundation. Currently in the plans that was provided, we could only see that there was one tree that was being planted along the building. So they are including the rain garden, which is part of a requirement from the county with regard to best management practices. So I think the Plan Commission board should take that into consideration, but there may be areas where additional foundation plantings can be included. So with that, depending on the wishes of the Plan Commission, tonight they did put together a staff report for recommendation of approval if you so choose, and it does have 10 conditions in it, keeping in mind that the original plan of operation would still stay in play as well. So when you read through this, for example, the hours of operation that are being proposed, these hours of operation would only be for the indoor facility. The other hours of operation for the outdoor facility would still remain as they were part of the other site plan of operation. So with that, Mr. Chairman, I'll turn it back over to you.
Engineer Janelli, could you address the fill-in of the wetlands area?
Certainly. In town code, as we've kind of heard this evening from comments from citizens, the town code has a conservancy setback of 30 feet from wetlands, and this is a no, kind of a no-touch zone, I guess. No grading, no building, no anything, except under conditional use and maybe some other issues. Given the fact that we've received state and federal concurrence that wetland fill is acceptable, it's a little gray. I would say that you know, the setback is kind of this is kind of a generic code that most communities have. In fact, the state of Wisconsin also has. In most instances, when we run up against this, it's for development of a piece of property in which we try to minimize the impact to wetlands for obvious reasons. In a case like this where we've, it's almost somewhat necessary to get wetland fill in order to do the project, the process that they're going through is traditional and acceptable and kind of happens rather frequently. These rules, this setback is in place to obviously protect the wetland. DNR often interprets their code such that if you can build within it, and you can build anything within it and right up to the wetland line, as long as any runoff from that is directed away from the wetlands or somehow cleaned prior to discharge into the wetlands. So in an instance like this, they've designed the building with the roof to be pitched away from the wetlands and roof drains directed to the rain garden, parking lots directed to the rain garden, and then that discharges by a long grass swale, in essence, all the way around the building to discharge to the wetlands. So although it sounds odd that we would be filling wetland, we're in essence reducing the setback to protect them as well. So I believe the town code doesn't specifically say in black and white that this is allowable, but I would say that the interpretation of similar codes in other communities and obviously the state allows for this.
In your opinion, does the Army Corps of Engineers and the DNR permits that have been issued override the town code?
I guess that might be a legal question. Obviously, the DNR and the U.S. Army Corps regulate the wetlands. So to fill them, they don't need a permit. No, they have a permit to fill them, so they can do that. Whether our setback overrides that, I guess I wouldn't say that it does, but it could be an interpretation.
Counselor, can you weigh in on that?
No, my
if-
answer would be no, it doesn't override it, because we already know the DNR, from even the engineer's report, the DNR allows building right up to the wetlands. You have the more restrictive code that requires 30 feet. So we have the right to be more restrictive.
Okay. In this case, if the wetland is filled in and doesn't exist in that area, does the setback then line get moved?
Generally, yes, I'd have to check the code. But is there any wetlands left on the property? And are they 30 feet from it?
How much wetlands are on the property? Approximately.
Acres. I'm not sure the exact amount.
But you've got wetlands in this area, here. Wetlands are actually here. So a significant portion of the property. We're taking this to the point right here. That's one of the ways to address. But the question is, is the building 30 feet from what will be the wetland?
No.
Thank you. In essence, they'd have to fill more wetland to create a 30-foot setback.
In essence, to conserve the wetlands, the DNR and the Corps of Engineers request that we minimize the amount of fill.
So rather than fill in more wetlands in excess of the 6,900 square feet to get to 30-foot setback, you'd increase that substantially?
Correct.
What's going to be inside the building? Is this a typical health club where you're talking about workout machines?
It's
and,
a training facility for athletes, ages, young kids to professional athletes across the board. They have rehabilitation for anything from disabled vets to knee and different joint rehabilitation.
What do you envision, a membership type operation?
You pay to participate, and they have different clubs will rent space in there. They have batting cages. I know there's professional football players that go there to work out. They lift weights. They do cardio. They do lacrosse training
What I'm getting at is it would be open to families.
on a pay-use basis.
Well, I
yes.
understand. But wouldn't that be for everyone? I mean,
Yes.
Is there another level of membership that,
Not that I know of.
okay. Is this a franchise is this something that's going on all around the country in here?
Is Next Level a franchise? No. It's a local company.
Okay.
They're located in Pewaukee right now off Westwood Drive.
One of the other questions that came up was a mound system. Are you connecting to the existing septic, or?
There's a mound system proposed on the west side of the property. We'll pump the effluent over to it near the existing system that they have for the park.
What about landscaping and the appropriate number of points for new landscaping?
We did take a look at that and increase the landscaping. We distributed a new plan that you should have.
And another question was parking. How many parking spots do you have?
I think Jamie counted 144 new stalls. of which will make sure the appropriate number of handicap stalls are installed.
Is the landscaping plan, is that an honest rendering of what it would be?
With the landscaping of the building, no, that's more to show just the building.
That's what I'm getting at. That looks rather Spartan, if you call that landscape.
Is this your new landscape plan?
Yes. Yep.
Because this is really not that visible from the road, is it?
Not at all. And it's up against the wetland.
Yeah, I know.
Planner Ray Barczyk, how many parking spots do you have, did you identify?
98. From the lot, including the lot to the north of the multi-use field, and then the lot to the south.
How many, 98?
98.
I thought it was 144.
It's 98.
Okay, 98.
And is 98 a sufficient number for the facility?
With regard to the parking that they have up in the northeast corner, and then the new parking that they're doing, the parking counts that we did using kind of a ratio of multiple sections of our ordinance, because our ordinance doesn't say how many you need per baseball field and how many you need for indoor facility. It talks about retail and service use and warehouse use and hospitals, et cetera. We felt that they were sufficient.
They work with about a third of the parking that they have right now.
What about the outdoor lighting?
The outdoor lighting is on the west side of the parking lot. On this side right here, shining onto the parking lot. And the foot candle count by the time we get to the east side of the parking lot is essentially 0. We can't put poles in the ATC easement.
And the screening between lot 26, 25, 24, along the other side of that power region. I mean, I'm thinking about the people that back up there off that cul-de-sac.
There's an existing tree line there.
All right.
Any other questions?
Well, I have a question. Is this where we, personally, my own personal opinion is I think it's an excellent use of the property. And I don't think it's very intrusive to any of the neighbors. As far as ironing out the things that are permitted, not permitted as far as the structure is concerned, but it's an excellent use of the property.
Supervisor Fisher?
Vacated the front of the building and stuff that was not the code, or is that been rectified with the landscaping part? The building itself, I mean.
With regards to the building itself, Planner Ray Barczyk, could you tell us what our code allows us to do?
With regard to,
Building
The building
materials?
itself, Jamie.
are you talking about the exterior of the building?
Yes. But there was some mention in the code about what's required in the town.
There was. The way that the code reads is that 50% of the building should be brick, decorative masonry, glass, finished facade approved by the Plan Commission and the town board. So the way that I interpret that is that at your discretion, if you feel that the metal siding is a finished grade material, then you could approve it as proposed. If you felt that it is not a finished grade material, then they would have to provide a different rendering to the building.
Okay, so there's no requirement for masonry or square footage of masonry in the front or anything like that? Is this up to the discretion of the plan commission?
Not technically. You have to buy the brick, decorative masonry, glass panel, EFIS, or other appropriate finished facade. So there's no discretion. But the planner has stated it correctly. If you find metal to be an appropriate finished facade, that's fine, but that means you're going to approve every metal building. Because if you find it to be a finished facade here, you're going to find it to be a finished facade elsewhere. And I don't know what your past practice has been. You can't say because of where this is located. This has nothing to do with that part of the code. This is an architectural standard, correct?
Mhm.
And so, does that answer your question?
Yeah, I
You
guess
have to
that's-
make it, you have to make a finding that it's a finished facade.
And I guess that's what my question is, what's we've done in the past, we have to be consistent, is what you're saying, John, that we have to be consistent on that.
And I don't know if you found other metal buildings, total metal buildings, to meet this requirement or not.
Planner Barczyk, do you have any input on that from past practice?
Within the town? The town?
We'll start with the town and then spread out from there.
Within the town of Waukesha, this is the first one that we've had, that I've reviewed with regard to architectural materials. In other communities, we're seeing, depending on location, we're seeing more and more of the Morton buildings that have usually the main entrance facade as the decorative architectural materials, and then the other three sides are the metal siding. So I think that there is a trend moving forward that the metal siding is becoming more popular. Maybe it's because of financial needs. But again, I think it's the discretion of the Plan Commission and the board.
Any other communities that you've seen this in, or do they have similar code requirements that we have that has some, it says 50%, but then has some leeway?
Town of Vernon is 33 1/3% on each elevation. Has to be of finished grade material.
I noticed there's no natural light in the building. Are there skylights planned? Are there exterior windows planned?
There's some exterior windows on the sides and on the end wall on both sides. We don't have them on the front. On the higher elevation, there's baseball batting cages up there. And with respect to the exterior finish, we do have a concealed fastener metal panel. The metal panel reads from a distance much like a precast panel. It's insulated. This panel is only about 1.5 inches or 2. The one we're using is 3 inches thick. It's a great R value, but a clean finish, clean gloss finish that from a distance reads very clean. And that's why we chose that. It is concealed fastener, so you don't have screws hanging out all over.
Could we see that, please? Supervisor Fisher?
Thank you. A couple of comments regarding the town policy issues that Planner Barczyk put before us. Number one, they're pertaining to the use. I would note that our P1 Park Recreation and Public District is for both public and private usage. This clearly is a private usage. There is verbiage in there that Planner Barczyk pointed our attention to as to whether or not the use serves a public interest. Clearly that's a somewhat subjective question to pose and answer. In my judgment, it does in this instance. We have a long list of permitted uses, some of them that seemingly might be inconsistent with others. This P1 zoning district is appropriate place for municipal buildings, churches. I find a bit interesting and tongue-in-cheek, it is also for bowling on the green. We haven't approved that recently, but it's a whole variety of usages there. And as Planner Robarczyk indicated, it includes building and structures that are necessary or consistent with those above uses. From my perspective, there's no question that this is a permitted use in the P1 zoning district. And I think it would be a very good use and a welcome addition to the town of Waukesha. Question 2 about the use of exterior building materials. My conclusion on that is that metal is an appropriate finish material. I think that doesn't limit the prerogative of this planning commission and the town board to consider individual projects and architectural aesthetics. I think those are two different questions. There's actually a lot of building design and construction going on with metal facades, not necessarily the type that you've contemplated, but some of that is frankly very, very high-end work. That's a simple reality of where we're at. So I think the answer to that is yes. I will tell you, I do have, or at least did have, a concern about the landscaping. I understand the context in which this is placed, proximity to other buildings and uses and so forth. It appears both in plan and on the rendering to be a bit Spartan. Apparently provided us with something additional. That's not the time or purpose or prerogative to evaluate that at this point in time.
We could work that out.
But I think you're coming up short on landscaping. The last comment that I would have is, listening a little bit to the discussion about the filling the wetlands, that type of thing. We need to be respectful of and honor our town ordinance and so forth. And I know we've got some professionals here that are a little bit struggling with that question. I hope they're going to be able to enlighten us. So those are my comments. It's a little bit of an open question moment. I understand that it is a relatively minimum area that's being impacted. Understand that you are proposing to take some efforts with the rain garden and the drainage and so forth to be respectful of that intent. I understand and appreciate that, but we're struggling a little bit with that issue. So those are my comments.
What is your perspective on the filling in the wetlands and setback requirements and so forth?
When I look at this project and say what they've done with this property and know where it could have gone, I look at it and I am a town citizen. This could have been a big parking lot. They've got infiltration throughout the site with the exception of the parking lots. This could have been an industrial or commercial space. They've got how many different fields? 6, 7 fields, 8 fields wide open. I think they've done an incredible job of using it as parkland, the infiltration, the green area that they've kept this space as. I think for them to take the 6,900 square feet that the DNR and the Corps of Engineers has approved, I think it's an appropriate use.
I was heading in a different direction. How do you get around our setback requirement?
I've seen this in different occasions where the setback has been varied because it's as we go into the wetlands, we don't want to extend another 30 feet and take more wetland to gain that, just to meet a setback. The Corps of Engineer and the DNR both agree that they'd prefer to see the minimal, and they have given us the minimal. I think 12 feet, 10 feet.
Planner Robarczyk, do you have the title and chapter for our setback requirement?
The P1 District Park Recreation is 13-3-10. And then with regard to the setback to the C1, it's 13-2-10.
Question?
Yes.
As people are researching and looking at that, and maybe this goes to planner or Bartek, or maybe the other gentleman here, do we know, I see your drawing identifies a line with reference to wetland, and I know we had item 5 on the second page of planner Bartek's staff review refers to the wetland delineation conducted by Don Reed back in April of 2010. I guess my questions are, is the wetlands line on your drawing, do we know for a fact that that is Don Reed's delineation? And then another question is there conservancy zone? For a minute, I guess I'm going to ask you to educate me or differentiate me, tell me they're one and the same, but the difference between the conservancy zoning and wetland, are they one and the same, or are they different in this instance?
In most cases, they're one and the same. Since I've come on board, I know that we have had issues with our C1 because it was identified under old modeling and mapping practices. We have been working with Waukesha County to have them draft a new zoning map for us based on the FEMA and DNR mapping. That draft map has been created, but it has not been adopted, but it does show, I think, more accurate boundaries for the Conservancy, but again, it hasn't been adopted. So as developments have been coming forward, and as we have been dealing with issues with wetlands, Chris and I have been looking at the information that we've been getting from the DNR, and we've been making the judgment based on that. In this case, in our interpretation, and I tend to agree with Chris that when you have the DNR and the Army Corps of Engineers that give you a delineation and a permit, we felt that that was the more accurate information than what the town had. But I believe that Attorney Macy has a different interpretation in that case.
Where is the new wetland? In relationship to the building?
10 feet south of the building. Is that correct?
Yeah.
So the question is, how do you get around that?
Fill more wetland. Yes. To get a 30-foot setback from the wetland, then we'd have to fill more wetland, which the Army Corps of Engineers doesn't want, or even the DNR doesn't want us to. That's the only.
Or shrink the building by 20 feet.
You can't move the building by 20.
No, we're up against the existing fields.
I have a question, Mr. Chairman. If the DNR establishes the wetland, and the DNR says to them, in essence, they're changing their rules to accommodate. I don't see why we're getting in the way.
I can answer that legally. Your town board has made a policy decision that your town code requires 30 feet from the wetland. Immaterial of what the Army Corps of Engineers says and the immaterial of what the DNR says, your town board has made a policy decision and wrote a law. So that's the legal answer to your question of why we're concerned about it. You as a plan commission are required to implement the policies established by the town board. I can't do anything but read you the law. They wrote a very specific law that said everything had to be 30 feet away. And we're struggling with how we get around that necessarily if you want to get around it, but it's a very specific law. So that's the answer to your question. Because we have a specific town code that is more restrictive than, and we know you have the right to be more restrictive.
Is there an option to move your building further? Yes.
We'd be moving it into the baseball fields, the Catholic Memorial Field.
Your multi-use field, just give me an idea what you have there.
If they're training in the summer months and the athletes want to go outside, whether it's to use sled for football or some ground ball fielding, any activity that they might be doing inside, they might a little lacrosse, catching, general activities that they can do inside or outside, just get them outside instead of...
120 by 105 is really not a lot.
It's not huge, no. But it gives them a grass area to work outside.
Yeah.
I did not go through the DNR process, but I question if they wouldn't then say, if your building's out of the, then they're gonna look at why do we need to fill wetlands? So we're gonna continue to slide.
Because to comply with the code that we have.
Yep.
Is there an option to, is there an option to move the building to the north 20 feet? In the alternative, is there an option to take a notch out of the building in the area where you would get to comply with that?
It would be, take a significant chunk out of the building.
The building to start with was about 14,000 square foot bigger, and we took that off. We've shifted the building 20 feet to the north. The building can't go any further than 20 feet to the north because that's where our main power source comes in. We have a three-phase system that comes into the park.
Dean, if we shifted the building, if they shifted the building to the north, is that going to impede your access also?
Because you'll be up tight against the fence, you know, for the fence. There wouldn't be any access to that. You can't do that.
And it's not strictly the building, it's the driveway. I mean, this is, again, approved by the DNR and the Army Corps. This is 8 months in the works to minimize and disturb the least amount of wetlands possible through a federal and state agency.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
Just the question I asked is open-endedly to any of the requesters here, even to our staff. Is there a possibility of creating some wetland area? I'm looking, west of the southwest corner of the building, and what is often done is creating, or in some instances restoring wetland restoration, but creating some wetland in there. Was that explored at all?
Well, there's a rain garden going there, behind the building. There's approximately 11 acres of wetlands on the property.
No, I understand that, but the rain garden is on the north side of the building,
West,
the west side as well?
right?
Okay.
Dan's gonna need access to the north.
No, I understand that. But I'm talking about come a little, the line down in there. Is there any possibility of extending that wetland line basically to the north and to the west? Is there any part of our town ordinance that would say that that baseball field has to be any distance away from the wetland? Is there a possibility of creating some there?
But how does that address this? That still doesn't address the setback issue.
Well, I guess I'll ask the question this way, and this maybe opens it up any, even further. I asked this of Attorney Macy, taking a look at it. Is it permissible to fill wetland any place in the town of Waukesha?
I don't know your code, that's not been the issue that's been raised by the public comments or any report, so I guess I would assume you can fill wetlands in the town of Waukesha if you receive the appropriate federal and state permits.
I mean, for the minute, taking it out of the context of that we have a proposal here and we've got the issue with the wetland before it. I mean, just theoretically, if somebody would have had requested permission and gotten permission to fill some wetland in there, or created some wetland some other places that weren't in conjunction with this project, would that be an issue?
I'm sorry, I don't understand. I'll be more than happy if you reword it to try to answer the question. I mean, would it be
If these were not coincident events, would it be an issue to fill wetland area in the town of Waukesha?
No, I mean, you could come in and get a permit to fill wetlands for a road or things like that, and this wouldn't be an issue because you wouldn't have the 30-foot setback then. The setback, the first question you asked is, what does the setback apply to? And I assume it's an offset or setback from a building or a structure. So if you're just building a road, I don't know that there's any offset of a road from anything. So this is the issue is because they have a proposed building within 30 feet of the wetland. So I don't know if I've answered your question. If they had come in years before or however and filled a wetland, we'd still look to where the current wetland line is. I mean, the new wetland line. I mean,
The new
wetland.
wetland.
Yeah.
You've answered
Measure
it,
30
right.
feet. And we're for
From the
this
new wetland.
discussion, giving the benefit of the doubt that there's a new wetland. It might require a rezoning, but that's another issue, because you have miszoned something, and if they take it out of the conservancy and it no longer meets the description of conservancy, the conservancy line might be able to be moved. But they've admitted it's 10 feet from the new proposed conservancy line, and that's what the public has raised issue with, is that we don't have the right. There's nothing in the code that we can find that can waive
I understand.
30 feet.
I understand. And our town, I guess I asked that back then to Chris and to Jamie, that is zone conservancy now coincident with that wetland line or not?
That's been the interpretation that we've been using when someone comes to us with wetlands, that we consider that to be zone conservancy, even though it's not mapped.
That's helpful because at least then we don't have to do a rezoning. It's a great question. It's not mapped, it's just by the definition of the C1, you look at the definition of C1, you say that's where the line is. Where the wetlands have been mapped to be is where the line is for the C1. Very typical in many zoning codes. So that line will move per our code, but it doesn't move, you know.
Chris, we've had many meetings, and the last meeting we left, it was crystal clear to everybody in the room. That doesn't answer the question. The question that we had all along was, if you had a permit from the Corps and a permit from the DNR, and you got county approval to fill within the wetlands, what happens to the setback line? Right. So with the, So I guess I don't understand the issue.
Law in the state of, I'm not giving a legal opinion, I'm just telling you what the code reads. I've not been given a chance to look at this. This is the first time it came up in citizen comments. So I'm not going to give a legal opinion. I can read the code and I can see what the code says in this black letter on its face. And what we don't know on the DNR side of it, just so you know, is you're telling me, and I did not know that, but I'm going to believe you, that the DNR has a 30-foot setback for structures also. But they must have a waiver provision or they can't allow this building. Billing has nothing to do with it. They have to have some kind of waiver procedure to say in certain instances the 30 feet doesn't apply, right? And if you're telling me they have a provision, my understanding, and I'm not refuting what you said, I've represented communities now, as you know, for 35 years. There was no wetland restriction. Now, there may be one now, and you're telling me there is in NR. Okay, so I'll believe that. But in the old days, there was no restriction. And the local communities could allow building right up to the wetland line, as long as nobody interfered or went in the wetland line. And then communities started to add provisions like this provision because they wanted to have it. Sussex, for instance, I think is only 15. We had none on a series of apartment buildings. We had no setback, and we allowed it to be built right up to the wetlands. They said then, I think that's ridiculous. So that's why I didn't know the DNR had one, and that's got to be fairly new. But if the DNR has a rule, they have to be 30 feet away. They also must have some provision to waive that rule if your drainage is this or that, or they don't have a rule that's 30 feet away. I'm just saying theoretically. We have this rule, and I can't find any exception to our rule.
The permit
It's
itself.
the permit.
The permit itself is actually stating that we can build with that 12 or 10-foot setback.
I understand that, but if the permit can't violate the law either. So they have to have a law that allows the permit to be issued. I'm not questioning that you didn't get the permit. That's not the question. What law allowed, what DNR law allowed them to grant you permission to build less than 30 feet from the new wetland? I don't know the answer to that question. But that question here is, I can't find a law that says that we can do that. Just because the DNR does or has a law that says you could, I can't find that law. I'll be more than happy to look for it, in the next few days, but I don't have a law here. I'll read you the section. Every structure, unless accepted by another section of this ordinance, maybe there's something in here, shall be at least 30 feet from the Conservancy District line and at least 2 feet above the highest ground elevation at the Conservancy District line on the lot. Filling and or grading activities within 30 feet offset area should not be allowed. They're clearly violated. And there isn't even a waiver of the second section of filling or grading activities within 30 feet of the offset area shall be allowed. Now, I hear the staff interpreting it as saying, unless approved by the Army Corps of Engineers and the DNR. I don't find those words there, that's why I'm struggling. Fair enough? I mean, and you're saying that past practice has been to read it, that all of this is okay as long as the Army Corps of Engineers and the DNR have approved it. But I can't find it, and I apologize, I don't have the code memorized. If there's something else in here that somebody knows, I'm more than willing to look at it. The chairman asked me to look for what I could look for, and I'm looking. I went to the special exception, and the special exception issued by the Board of Zoning Appeals only allows them 25% reduction or a 33% reduction. I won't get to 10 feet. The special exception law allows a reduction of the offset, but not that far. And then Jamie asked me whether they could get a variance, and I said, I don't think so. They've got acres and acres. They can put this building anywhere. They just want this building here. And they have lots of good reasons why they want the building here, but it ain't going to make a hardship or a practical difficulty under the law. Because they could take out other fields and put the building somewhere else and not be anywhere near the wetlands, right? So I don't know how the zoning board of appeals can grant a find a hardship or a variance.
Well, those in our special exception section says that you don't have to show a hardship or variance.
That's correct, but they'll only get, they don't get to the whole,
30 foot.
they can't get the whole 10 feet. So then Jamie asked me whether they could apply for a variance, and I said, yeah, but under the law, they won't get it. This is self-imposed, they picked this spot. Under the law, I don't know how they will get it. So they can get a 25% reduction without showing a hardship under a special exception, if that's not enough. I mean, they would be able to reduce the building less, but they wouldn't be able to, you know.
Is that an option?
Reducing the size of the building.
We already did.
It seems like the three options that we have moving forward is, one is that they'd have to go back to the DNR of the Army Corps of Engineers and request an additional fill to meet the 30-foot. Two is to make the building smaller, or three is that the town amends the ordinance.
And there is a fourth option, and that's we table it for tonight, and we research it further and see if we can find out whether there's something else in the code that allows it. We just can't find it in the many pages that we have here.
You would
In
suppose.
past town boards that have done this, maybe in the minutes of those meetings, we can find how they understand what I mean. Britt, I mean, your question and the engineer's answer was very helpful on the conservancy line. That the conservancy line is not a map. If this was a zoning map wetland, we'd have another problem. But this is a practical wetland, it's a mapped wetland, and we go by that, and that's very common, so that's great, so we don't have to do it with zoning. But we can continue to look and see if we can find a solution, and at least, if we find out how the DNR does it, maybe we can find out how we can do it. Does that make sense? That's the only reason I wasn't trying to quiz anybody to the extent of, you know, just, they may have a provision. If they have a specific provision, then we have to look for the same provision, right?
In your DNR approval, was there anything in there that stated how they got to that? How they got to the exception of their 30-foot rule?
You had to work with them to minimize the wetlands, so it was a narrower road, it was a smaller building, you shifted the building to the point of where you can't shift it or turn it or twist it any longer.
I understand, but we're trying to get to a point where, to find out how they got past their 30-foot rule, and how did they get an exception for that, so that we can look in the same direction. Well, according to Engineer Janelli, they do.
That's what the permit is. Go into that, it's cut and dry, right? We're micromanaging the heck out of what we're doing. Like I said, it's been an 8-month approval. We turned the stuff in 3 weeks ago, and now we have to go look to see how they did it.
Yes. It's got to be satisfied. You got to satisfy the code, Tom.
Well, then it should have been done at staff, and we turned the stuff in 3 weeks ago. It should have been looked into. We've had many meetings since we turned the stuff in, and this has never been brought up to this degree.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
Question, I guess I'll direct this to Attorney Macy. This is on our agenda for discussion and possible action if the Plan Commission were of a mind to sort of take the, I think, last suggestion that you had, that take some time and research this and find out what we might find. Am I correct? We're not compelled to act on this tonight in any manner?
You're not compelled to act on it.
Okay, we're not under any, other than I know the applicant is anxious, we're not under any time constraints or restrictions or impositions.
The court says you have to act on an application within a reasonable time, and reasonable time could be 6 months or a year.
Okay. Well, I guess it would be my suggestion that we do not take action on this matter tonight until we get some clearer vision on these issues before us. And I'm not making that in the form of a motion, it's simply a suggestion that we not act on it tonight.
Second.
No, that wasn't a motion.
That wasn't a
He said it
motion?
was not a motion.
Oh, I thought
To assist these gentlemen, before you make a motion, because once a motion is made, theoretically, Mr. Chairman, you're not supposed to take any further discussion on it. I'd like to walk through, by going around the table, the other policy decisions that need to be made. And so, could we just start at one end, and I don't care which end you start at, it just, does everybody find the uses that proposed, I mean, the town policy issue on page 2 of the report? You could go to your report. Questions have been made, and I just want to, we're going to go around the table, we're not going to take the vote necessarily, maybe you will, but that's up to you, but does everyone find the uses that they're proposing to be used for meet to the P1 district? I know you've already stated yes. So there's no question of the uses, and I don't think the citizens have necessarily raised an objection to uses, but I'm bringing this up only because your planner brought it up. Okay? Right? The next one is the panel. And are you willing to say, or do they need to bring back a different facade? That's a policy decision. You're going to be making, when you vote, be it tonight or any other time, you're going to be voting that this is an appropriate finished facade. And I'm just telling you, and you already heard me say it and you know it, that means anybody else who brings in this facade will be meeting your 50% rule. It's a very important decision. I mean, and it doesn't do them any good if you're going to table it just to research the shoreline, the conservancy issue, not to know where you're at on the facade issue. Fair enough?
Yes.
And so,
Yes.
you think it needs to?
I do.
I've seen enough of that type of finished material in newer buildings. You could look downtown Waukesha. The newest apartments that are there are largely metal buildings. I don't have a problem.
I told them from the get-go that I didn't think it was the most aesthetic building, but I think it serves the purpose for this facility.
Unfortunately, Chief, that's not going to cut the mustard legally, because whether this building is on the corner of 164 and 59, or this building is tucked away, you would have to approve this same material for that building. So I just need to tell you that. I mean, and the other three have said they find this material to be fine. If anybody walks in a location and has 100% building with this material on, I'm going to tell you legally, you've made a decision tonight that that material is fine. And that's fine. I'm not being critical. I'm just saying you need to know the import of this decision.
I'm sorry. I have a question on that. You mean that we can't, as a board, this building is not really next to anybody other than open ground. It has no, if we, in any other condition, if somebody came in and wanted to use this material, we couldn't make them change the use and how they use the material?
If I'm correct, if I'm reading the planner's report properly, you're making a finding that at least 50% of the exterior of this building has a finished facade. That material is a finished facade.
I understand that, but I'm looking ahead because I think that's the threat here. You're saying that if somebody comes in 3 years from now and they're located on a corner with abutting 3 properties or in a very active area, that we as a board, because we've done this in the past, we've made people enhance the exterior of the building.
That's one type of finished facade. We could require that the finished facade on the corner of Sunset and Genesee Road is brick.
Well, I could look up the code, and I'll defer to the planner. The planner paraphrased that it has to be 50% either brick, decorative masonry, glass panel, EFIC, or other appropriate finished facade. You're making the decision that this is You're not gonna require brick, decorative masonry, that this meets the requirement. How do you say it meets the requirement for this guy as a finished facade for this building, but not another building? That's
Well,
not the
my
issue.
point. That's, I guess I'm not asking it properly. This doesn't, if that was all canvas, nobody, it would hurt nobody. The use would be okay. Now, if that was next to 2 or 3 homes or next to another building that was enhanced, then we as a board would never have a right to tell that guy to improve the look of the building. We've done it all for years.
You can negotiate with them, you can talk to them, you can ask them to put in windows. I see plan commissioners do it every month. But if they meet the code, you can't require more than the code. You can ask them, but you can't require more than the code requires. Fair enough?
This is the brick, or is this, you're allowed to have one or the other. Each building, now, we're gonna set a precedence here from now on, every building's gonna be steel.
It's meeting, you're saying this building meets the requirements. So if I'm a builder and I want to build in another location, and I come in and look at these minutes, and I'll say, and Jamie, does it read differently than you paraphrased it?
I apologize, Attorney Macy, but I disagree with you. I think that the Plan Commission and the board, and I've seen it in other communities with design standards, it's at the discretion to take into consideration the location.
Is that what the code says?
That's how I interpret the code.
I'm just telling you guys that you're not going to win in court if you decide that if they come in with a building that's 50% brick, and you want 100% brick, you're not going to win. So now extrapolate that same thing.
If I could just weigh in for a minute, the words of this, we can look at the rest of it. It says other appropriate finished facade. Do we not have some discretion as to decide what is appropriate in a particular situation or condition? I mean, I thought that's what architectural review boards are all about. I think the word appropriate, to me, the interpretation says that we can consider context and site location. That's my interpretation.
Keep in mind, it is a concealed fastener architectural metal panel. It's not the old flat splits.
I think on anything, any project that I've ever done, the Plan Commission has always had the opportunity to review the materials that I've used and suggested something else or more of a masonry product or ethos product. And I think it's been up to the Plan Commission's discretion. I respectfully disagree. Decide if it's appropriate.
It's just not, I don't have the whole code up here. I'll look at the whole code. But that, from what I'm reading here, they have a requirement to meet 50% of either brick, decorative masonry, glass panel, EFSI, or appropriate finished facade. And when you make the determination that it's appropriate, why isn't it appropriate? Because you're going to say because it's a different location?
Certainly, absolutely. If you're on the corner of Sunset and Genesee Road, which is a hallmark rather than buried into a ball field or a park, I think that's an entirely different approach.
I understand what you're saying. I don't believe that's what a court would say. And I know what plan commissions do. I sit at hundreds of plan commission meetings. They get the best building they can get out of it.
Yes.
Thank you.
How about on to number 3?
Number 3, there's already been questions about the landscaping, and I'm not, I mean, apparently some have stated they think there's not enough landscaping, and so if that's the consensus, if you want a new landscaping plan, you should tell them. If the landscaping's adequate, you should tell them.
I think that's something that could be reviewed with staff and satisfy staff's requirements. Jamie, would you be okay with that?
Well, because we're tabling it tonight, they'll have ample time to put together a new landscape plan and bring it back before the Plan Commission. So.
What is the pleasure of the board?
I agree. Oh, the plan, oh, all right. Well, I move that we table it and give them a chance to get the ducks in there.
Is there a second? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed?
Motion carries.